The day after posting Transformers Part 5, I announced that I was going to be doing a Q&A video, something that might even become an annual tradition. I sent out the word both on my Twitter page and my YouTube community tab, alongside the Lost Light Transformers Discord server, because, as many of you will not know, I've been running a Transformers Discord server for the past couple years. It's not dedicated to me, it's dedicated to the big funny robots. But it's a fun space, it's very inclusive, very progressive. Transformers is obviously the central focus, but we talk about other things as well. If you're nice, you can come be part of it. There's a link in the description down below. Just be sure to read the rules and don't mind a guy named Carmine the Local. He's a bit weird. In any event, I posted in these 3 areas asking for questions, and I've compiled a bunch here to answer what you've been dying to know. Of course, not every question is in here, so if you don't see yourself, I apologize. But there were also a few repeated questions, so hopefully even if your comment didn't pop up on screen, I still covered what you were interested in asking. Like one of the most popular questions, which was, will you make a video about insert franchise here? To which I will give you all the same answer. Maybe. The Batman? Maybe. Ninja Turtles? Maybe. Stranger Things, Squid Game, everything on this list? Maybe. Although, don't hold your breath on My Little Pony. I don't want to close any doors for people, never say never, but I also can't guarantee anything. So the best I can offer is a big ol' maybe. I hope that works. With all that established, welcome to the 2025 Primes Theater Q&A. Let's get started. How do you get ideas for your retrospectives? Is there an existing pool or whatever draws your interest in the moment? It really does just revolve around whatever I have interest in. A retrospective is often a product of a hyperfixation of mine, Sometimes the inspiration comes when I least expect it. I might just be watching a movie or playing a game or something and think, I might want to talk about this. And once that thought enters my brain, the wheels start turning immediately on what the video would look like, how much it would cover, the important things that I think would have to be part of it, all that stuff. Though there's definitely a pool of possibilities. I feel like I can talk about a ton of things, some of which I listed off during the 100K special video I did. What is your process for writing a script for a video? During the writing process, I'm usually doing a lot of things at once. I'm likely reading about whatever the topic is, I'm seeking out behind-the-scenes documentaries and information from there, anything I can really find basically as I'm writing. The idea being that I really want to put myself in the headspace of the time. If I was there, learning this information as it was coming out, how would I feel about it? Using what I also know of what the atmosphere was actually like at the time to inform how I cover it. So the first draft process really is just me unloading what my brain is thinking at that moment, in a way that flows as good as it can, a skill I've just kind of honed over time. Then when it comes to the main attraction, I guess, be it a movie or TV season or video game, I then go and watch or play that. I might take notes after every episode or every mission, and then work that into a cohesive section of the video, ranging from something as short as 3 pages to 10 or even 20 pages, depending on what it is. Rinse and repeat for every title in there until I get to the end. After that, it's all about smoothing it over and making sure that my potential ramblings are replaced with stuff that makes a lot more sense. And in many cases, I start adding in information that I missed. Stuff that would have slowed me down during the first draft process when I'm on a roll, but now have a bit of time to really dive into and do some justice to. The I Love Bees campaign for Halo 2 was a section that was mostly added later. When I was writing the first draft, I was just on a mission to get to Halo 2 proper. That was the goal. It wasn't until after I had the first draft that I went back and spent a lot more time researching that campaign to be able to give it a dedicated section, to do it a lot more justice than I could have if I was trying to add it in all at once. How long is your research process and what do you decide to include is important for each retrospective? I can tell you the process for making an entire video takes roughly 3 months. The research and writing process mostly exists within the first month while I'm writing the first draft. But even though I'd say 80% of the research happens in the first month, I'm finding new things almost all the way up to the wire. New information that I didn't have before that I'm able to spot, likely because I'm looking at it differently. In terms of figuring out what's important, a lot of the time it boils down to what I find most interesting. But there's also this constant sense of, well, I have to mention that a lot of the time that chases me throughout the writing and revision process. Other times it's just a matter of setup and payoff. In my MCU video, for example, I wanted to reference some of the last lines Cap and Bucky say to each other in Endgame. So much earlier I had to include the same exchange from the first Captain America movie so I have both points covered. I have 2 questions that I've had throughout all of my rewatches of the first 4 parts and my first watch of part 5. How does research for these videos look and how long does that take for you? What is your favorite thing, story, trivia, weird fact you found while undergoing your research for it? I usually start with some amount of baseline knowledge about whatever it is I'm going to talk about. Sometimes I know a lot more, like with Transformers. Other times I have to find a lot of things out, which was true with Mission Impossible. Crazily enough, Wikipedia is genuinely a fantastic place to start, and one of the few remaining bastions of actual information in this age of AI overviews and what have you. Dedicated wikis for whatever franchise are also incredibly useful. TF Wiki, Halopedia, Destinypedia. But those are not the sole source, of course. That's just my way in the door. From there, one of the tricks I use is on Google. You can actually narrow your search parameters to a specific time period. This is one of the most useful tools because it just narrows things down to a specific point in time where I get to see exactly what people were saying, exactly what was topical in a given moment, which was especially useful on something like the MCU or the Star Wars videos. You don't get to find some of these things any other way. Then other times I happen to luck out and someone's curated a bunch of handy information that I can look through. It really just starts with some kind of question. I want to know a particular piece of information, so I need to look around for a bit and see if anyone recorded the answer somewhere. As for a favorite piece of trivia, I have no idea, honestly. I think the most exciting stuff is usually around the creation of a given thing. The origin story, there's lots of fun there. But if I had to pick out one thing in particular that was funny, I'd say the time the first Halo game was briefly codenamed Monkey Nuts within Bungie, but Jason Jones decided to change it because he didn't want to tell his mom he was working on a game called Monkey Nuts. 3 questions. 1. Pirates of the Caribbean retrospective? Maybe. What's the process for doing a video retrospective, and how are you doing? I'm doing great. So I talked a lot about the first draft process, but after that's done, a bunch of revisions happen, usually taking me to draft 4 or 5. I'll read through the script and make those changes that it really needs. At a certain point, I either get tired of revising it, or it's at a place where I don't think anything else really needs to be done. Once that happens, it's time to start audio recording. I do about 90 minutes of recording in a session, which will cover roughly 25 pages of the script. And it's just raw audio with all sorts of pauses and mistakes and that kind of stuff, which I then edit the next day. Audio editing is in some ways the most tedious part, but there's a comfort in its mindlessness to some extent. Audio editing is just editing out the pauses, the mistakes, putting in background music, and nailing the timing on some things. Once the audio editing is done, I now know almost exactly how long the video is going to be, and I can get started on video editing. That's when I take what is otherwise a black screen and put images to it that match whatever it is I'm talking about. I can do about 30 minutes of video editing in a day. I prep for those 30 minutes the night before, grabbing any footage or images I don't already have that I think I'm gonna need. That goes on for however many days it takes to get to the end. And once I'm at the end, the video's done. That's it. Game over. There might be a couple last-minute adjustments. Transformers Part 5 had a few little last-minute add-ons here and there. But outside of the copyright gauntlet, which I'm trying to find new ways to work around, the video's done and it's time to send it out to the world. Alright, we got 3 questions here. I'm going to work through them in reverse order. Starting with, how inevitable do Thanos be? I think Thanos is pretty inevitable. I mean, he kept saying it in the movie. But also he lost, so maybe that was the true inevitability. The second question, how do you choose the way you break up each video into each part? Like, it's easy with stuff like Star Wars and the MCU, but franchises like Transformers don't have clear ways to segment them up. Now, you're right in that something like Star Wars and the MCU were pretty easy to figure out. Each phase of the MCU gets a video. Each Star Wars trilogy gets a video. Other things are less clear. When I did the Transformers video, the original idea was that it would be a 2-parter. I didn't think I would spend as much time on that as I did with the MCU. So part 1 was going to end with the first live-action movie, and part 2 was going to cover everything after that. But once I fully got in there and started writing about G1, I wound up spending a lot more time there than I expected. And I knew pretty quickly 2 videos wasn't going to cut it. It was going to have to be a 4-parter. I didn't know where the splits were going to be until after I had a complete first draft. The script started as just one long thing. Then I had to get out the scissors and find a good spot to split it up. A part of that came with math, just dividing the thing into 4 quarters and seeing what happens. But the more effective method is having a sense of what makes a good ending and what makes a good beginning. Beast Machines is kind of the last show in the original continuity for Transformers before they started doing reboots in the 2000s. So that quite quickly became a natural stopping point, and Part 2 could start with the process of rebooting with the Unicron trilogy leading into the first movie. The aim with all of them was that I didn't want any TV show to reach over multiple videos. I wanted to make sure the entirety of a given show was within one video. I didn't want one season of animated to be in Part 2 and another season to be in Part 3. I wanted all of it in one place. So all of that combined made the decisions on how to split that pretty apparent. I knew what I wanted out of it, I knew the bigger picture, and I just wanted to find good endings and beginnings for each one. But it is a consistent challenge. On the Destiny video that I'm working on, I started with a pretty clear idea of how it would be split up. But after I had the first draft and can kind of see the whole picture, it wasn't working all that well. So I decided to move things around a bit to create a new structure. And then looking at it again, that structure didn't quite work either, so I changed things a third time.
This is a process. It's a process. It's a process.
But the core of it is finding good endings, or at least working with the best endings I can. And then your first question, would you be interested in doing a retrospective series on the Universal monsters, specifically the original series from 1931 to 1956? Now this would be an interesting one to tackle, going much farther back than I ever have. Again, I can't guarantee anything, but that is an interesting suggestion. What was your favorite video to do the research for? Were there any that you found sort of dragged a bit, or any that felt particularly enjoyable throughout the creation process? I don't know if any research process dragged necessarily. I do remember Mission Impossible was a challenge because my usual tricks on Google weren't yielding many results, so I had to find other ways of getting the information, which is how I found the Light the Fuse podcast, something that dramatically opened the door on information regarding those movies, especially the earlier ones. In terms of my favorite? The whole Bungie universe is honestly really fun to look into. From the development of the Halo trilogy to the depth of the Destiny universe, Destiny especially is one of the most well-documented things I've ever covered. There's too much information, actually. There's no way I'll be able to cover all of it, but there's lots of great stuff. What's your favorite part of the process when you do a video? Is it the investigation to get all the info, the recording, the editing, and the search for all the visuals? Greetings from Mexico. Greetings from Canada. Honestly, I think writing is my favorite part in a lot of ways. It's the part that feels the least like work. Other sections do have a bit more of a clock in, clock out kind of mentality. Not that they're not fun, but it does become a tiny bit more scheduled and rigid once I get to audio and video editing. I think the real thing that makes writing my favorite part is the process of discovery. I'm learning all of these things, and I'm learning way more than what goes into the video, let me tell you. But I'm expanding my knowledge on whatever topic it is. It's also the time where I am the most challenged, if that makes sense. I try to make it so that each video presents some kind of challenge that I haven't done before. Transformers Part 5 was the biggest one recently, where it had 7 guest stars, and I had to figure out a way to balance everyone, give everyone their due, and make sure it flowed nicely from top to bottom. A lot of that happened in the script, though in that particular case the video editing and final touches were equally exciting because I finally got to see how it was all really going to work, and discovering that it would work was pretty sick. So writing, the process of discovery, I think that's where 90% of the video is made, honestly. That's the make or break process. Recording and editing are just building off of that for the last 10%. How do you grab my attention for so many hours while really just talking? You are just that good, I could watch you all day. Those are very kind words, thank you. The truth is, I don't know if I have some kind of magic formula, but what I always try to do, knowing how long these videos always are, is get it moving as soon as humanly possible and then keep it moving. I don't want to dilly-dally on a single topic for too long. Each moment needs its time, but once I've said what I need to say, there's no hanging around. We gotta move on to the next thing. And then when it comes to the revision process, it's all about making sure the flow of information is legible. I like putting myself in the headspace of someone who's watching the video for the first time, especially someone who's never seen one of my videos before. Do they understand what's going on? And if I reach a point in the script where I'm like, your layman won't know what this means, then I gotta figure out a way to change it so it makes more sense. If there was a single more conclusive approach though, it's that my goal is to tell a story. If there was any genre my videos fit into on YouTube, it'd probably be video essay, but I actually don't really like the term video essay. Not that there aren't great video essays out there, but it's not the approach I want to take. If only because essays are boring. But you know what's not boring? Stories. We tell each other stories all the time, and that's kind of the mindset I have going into videos, to find the ups and downs, to not just provide information, but hopefully attach that information with some kind of emotion, to get you to root for something or feel bad when things go wrong. In fact, one of my favorite videos on this website in the last couple years was that 2.5-hour Rich and Poor Minecraft Civilization video from Ish. I mean, that's a video that's telling a story, a saga. It might look silly from the outside, but it really does get you invested and locked in for the whole runtime, with interweaving plot lines and characters and insane twists met with an actually satisfying climax. That's more the kind of thing I like to chase. I want to get you invested in the goings-on, and then filter in some of my own analysis and breakdown of a certain thing because I like doing that too. This next question comes from Darkstar. What was the thought process behind choosing the retrospectives in this year's lineup? Now, Darkstar knows this, but there was a bit of a journey to land on at least one of the projects this year. After I finished the Star Wars Redux, but before it came out, I was thinking of making a video about myself. I know, so cringe, right? It was going to be about my own videos, the process behind each one, kind of doing some self-reflection at the same time, and examining what may or may not work from my own perspective. It was even perfectly timed because it was going to bookend with both versions of Star Wars that I had done, which felt pretty nice in terms of symmetry. But after Star Wars Part 2 came out, and I received justified heat for certain aspects, I didn't feel like gassing myself up at all. Not that doing this was even that great of an idea to begin with, but it became significantly less appealing after that video went out. So I wanted to pivot to something else. Around November of last year, I happened to rewatch the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. You know, I hadn't seen them for a while, so I was like, sure, let's run it. And thinking about the technology involved and how big those movies are as blockbusters, I started to get excited about the idea of covering them for a retrospective. I started getting some behind-the-scenes footage, I kind of had a way to start the video, the meal prep was going swimmingly until Star Wars Part 3 kept hitting worse and worse copyright problems. I pretty quickly drew the connection that since both Star Wars and Pirates were Disney, Pirates was going to cause me problems too. I was having a nightmare with Star Wars Part 3 and didn't want to relive that right away again, so I decided to hold off on doing a Pirates of the Caribbean video. Around that time, in December of last year, I rewatched Interstellar. It was topical again because of the 10th anniversary re-release, so I decided to give it another shake, and I really enjoyed it. That gave me enough of a push to wonder, could I do a Christopher Nolan video? It was a done deal then and there. I got the Nolan movies I hadn't owned yet, and by the time Star Wars Parts 3 and 4 finally came out, I locked down and started working on it. No video has ever had that much of a path to get made, but that was the journey to how the Christopher Nolan video got chosen to be next after Star Wars was all said and done. As for Transformers Part 5, that's a video that I started thinking about pretty soon after Transformers 1 came out. Before that happened, I kept thinking there wasn't much to cover, but Transformers 1 managed to take it over that line. I felt like there was now a video I could make continuing the Transformers series. But I also wanted it to be special in some way. For some reason, it would have been somewhat disappointing, at least for me, to just jump back in and talk about Transformers for another couple hours. It needed another hook. It was actually in March of this year that it dawned on me that I could potentially get other people to be a part of it, to offer their perspectives on the last couple years in a way that was really exciting and very different from anything I'd done before. Once that idea was in my head, it was all over. Transformers Part 5 was happening after the Nolan video. I just had to man up a bit and actually start asking people to be part of it, which I did, and it worked out. The fact that I got it out on the 1-year anniversary of Transformers 1 and just after the release of issue number 24 of Skybound series was a happy coincidence. I'm glad it worked out that way. And then of course we have Destiny. This one's been a long time coming. I honestly could have jumped right into Destiny after finishing the Halo video, like it would have been a really easy jump to make. But I felt like maintaining some amount of variety before jumping back into Bungie land. Now, variety has been achieved. We've covered some other stuff, it's time to head to the Cosmodrome. So the skinny of it really is, once I get excited about a topic, for one reason or another, it gets bumped up the list and becomes a bit more of a priority. I don't know if you've ever grown up with or have ever been interested in Bionicle, but would you ever do your own retrospective on Lego Bionicle? And on that note, do you only do retrospectives on franchises that you grew up with, or would you also make retrospectives on other franchises you may not be so familiar with? While quite a few of the things I've covered are things I've grown up with, some other things aren't. I didn't grow up with Community, for example. I watched that show a couple years after it was over. Halo is another one that I got into many years later. I had some brief connections to those games before, but since I mainly had a PlayStation in the house and not an Xbox, it just never really came my way until the Master Chief Collection went to Steam. The challenge in tackling something I didn't grow up with, or that I wasn't there for, is that I have to do a lot more digging. The research process has to become a lot more involved because I don't have that first-hand account to draw from. Like, for example, if I did a Bionicle video, something I didn't grow up with, I'd have to do a lot of digging and potentially ask some people who know a lot more about it than I do for some basics. Have you ever considered a retrospective on TMNT after you wrap up Destiny? Or do you consider taking a break after Destiny? Because making these things can take a lot out of someone. Ninja Turtles? As I mentioned, maybe. You know, nothing's impossible. But it is another thing that I didn't really grow up with, so that would be a mild hurdle. As for taking a break, I never plan breaks, they just kind of happen. And when they do, I'm usually pretty quiet about them. So we'll see. I've been going pretty hard on every project this year since diving into the Nolan video in March, so maybe burnout is inevitable once Destiny's done. But we'll see. We've got 2 comments here asking about what other filmmaker retrospectives I might make. There are 2 that are swirling in my head right now. One is about Michael Bay, who of course has an infamous track record, but I think he's very fascinating as a filmmaker. Even if I think a lot of his movies are kind of terrible, there's still something really interesting about them. The other is James Cameron. He's someone with no shortage of behind-the-scenes drama and crazy stories to look into and talk about, but also some absolutely fantastic 4-quadrant blockbusters. Terminator 2 rules, I like both of the Avatar movies, and Titanic is genuinely one of the best movies ever made, I'd say. So I'd be so game to talk about any and all of those. Now, the Goth Cat Girl also asks about my rank of the Star Wars movies. I don't put ranks in videos anymore, not just because it becomes a hot button issue in the comment section, but because they're always changing. But if you want, I have a letterbox you can look at that has a bunch of ranks that I do sometimes move around when I feel like my opinions have changed a bit. Link in the description. Leah Manila has 2 questions. 1, are there any topics you will never make a retrospective on? As in, you refuse to ever make a retrospective for it because you feel uncomfortable doing so or just a lack of interest. And 2, what are your main inspirations in your style of documentation? So to start with the first question, I never want to say never, but there are certainly some that are quite unlikely, if only because I'm just not that knowledgeable about them. There are a lot of things I don't know about, and in those cases, the chances of me making a video go down pretty significantly. Again, never say never. I could certainly gain an interest in something later down the line that I don't know anything about now, so I'm not closing any doors, there are just other doors that I've opened more. I mentioned this in the 100K special, but an X-Men video would be tricky because of Bryan Singer. The problem is I think he is a terrible person who's done horrible things, and he's also made some of my favorite movies in that series. I haven't quite wrapped my head around how to map those 2 things simultaneously in a video. The day I figure that out, though, is probably the day I decide, yeah, I'm gonna dive into this. Now, to your second question, what was my main inspiration? When I did the original Star Wars video, I remember thinking about these documentaries that I really enjoyed. The Toys That Made Us episode on Transformers was up there, the Empire of Dreams documentary on the original Star Wars trilogy was up there, but I was always disappointed that they started slimming down past the origin story. Which makes some amount of sense, you know, the origin is what everyone's there for. But Empire of Dreams talks a lot more about the original Star Wars than it does Empire or Jedi. The Toys That Made Us on Transformers spends most of its time on G1 and then blasts through Beast Wars in the movies in like the last 5 minutes. Not to say these things were bad, obviously, I really enjoyed them. I just wanted them to keep going when they never did. And there was nothing else comparable to fill the void. So when it came to making all of my videos, I wanted to put equal weight on just about everything. I'm gonna keep the same amount of density on The Rise of Skywalker as I would on the very first Star Wars movie. Now, I don't think I nailed the balance right away. In fact, I don't think I figured that out until the Marvel video. That was when I finally nailed what the formula was and what I liked about it. On top of the simple nature that no one ever talks about trailers. They exist in their own specific pocket of time. No one talks about a trailer after the movies come out. So that became a window for me, someone who loves a good trailer, to explore something that no one else really does on this website, at least from what I've seen. AA's question is, what do you think about the current state of Marvel, and do you think the new Avengers movies will convince you to make more videos on it? I think the next 2 Avengers movies are really going to have to pull something spectacular to get me to make another video. I don't think the state of Marvel has necessarily improved since I made Part 5. They have started to separate the movie and TV divisions, which is undoubtedly a good move, but even still I haven't liked a lot of the movies in the last 2 years. But Prime, didn't you quit? Well, to give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, no, not really. Now, I have stopped watching the Disney Plus shows. I caught up with Loki Season 2, which I thought was alright, but I've skipped everything else. I've come to the conclusion that I never want to watch another Marvel Disney Plus show again. They quickly became chores instead of entertainment. The movies, however, I've kept up with those, because I like going to the movies, and 3 MCU entries a year isn't too much for me to handle. Of those, The Marvels was fine, Deadpool and Wolverine wasn't my thing, it had moments, but it was a nostalgia fest that did nothing for me whatsoever. Captain America 4 was pretty bad. Thunderbolts Asterisk and Fantastic Four were definite steps up. I really enjoyed Thunderbolts Asterisk in particular. That one was a lot of fun, but they're not enough yet to get me to come back. Since every video takes roughly 3 months to make, I need to be able to lock in for those 3 months. I honestly didn't think I was going to make Part 5 back then because I realized that I was losing interest. It wasn't until I figured out that that could be the point of the video that it became worthwhile. So Marvel Part 6 is at this point unlikely. Again, never say never, but I don't have high hopes for the next 2 Avengers movies. Casting Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom is an insane choice, I think. He can absolutely pull off a killer performance, but it's definitely stunt casting to try and drum up interest from people who are nostalgic for the MCU of old. Coupled with all of the returning 2000s X-Men cast, which is just more nostalgia pandering, it's not doing much of anything for me right now. I'd be more interested in something new, I think. But who knows? These movies might rule and I might eat my words in the next 2 years. Either that or they're total disasters, and that makes Marvel Part 6 worth it. That's also possible. Do you enjoy the movie or the game retrospectives more? I enjoy both, but could imagine the research is different because of them being 2 different types of media. They're quite a bit different, yeah. Marketing and trailers are a very big part of these videos, and the approach on that front from movies to video games is totally different. A movie will have 2, maybe 3 trailers, followed by a bunch of TV spots, and then maybe a few promotional tie-ins for good measure. But video games can have 10 trailers before they come out. From pre-rendered CG trailers to gameplay showcases to live streams to big reveals at the Game Awards or E3. Not to mention the video games that are promoted years in advance, which hasn't quite been a huge factor in what I've been covering with Halo and Destiny, but it is a thing that happens a lot in the gaming industry. Transformers Reactivate was kind of like that before, of course, that whole thing came crashing down to the ground. Video games also present a new challenge that isn't there in movies and TV shows. With Halo and Destiny, a lot of the footage is my own, which on one hand is great. You know, it's me playing, it's me going through these levels and getting the exact footage I need. But there's no way I'm gonna remember where everything is in the hours and hours of footage I have. So what I've been doing is I create this document where I can list off all of the individual clips I might want based on what's mentioned in the script, and then I have to go through the footage and locate it. That way, once I get to video editing, I can look through this list and figure out exactly where a certain clip might be, instead of having to halt all of my momentum to go search for it. And that's not a factor in movies at all, since they're fixed. They're the same every time. I know exactly where to find a given scene in a movie to get a clip from it. The benefit to video games, though, at least so far, is that copyright is way more lenient. I uploaded a whole 7.5-hour Destiny cutscene compilation onto Galvatron Galvatron's channel, a video that doesn't have a single ounce of my commentary over it, it's just unedited cutscenes, and it got no claims. Try uploading a full movie and you'll get clapped into oblivion, so that's a benefit. To answer the question, I enjoy both for different reasons, but right now I'm leaning towards video games only because that's what I'm working on at the moment. And if you want to check out that Destiny cutscene video, the link to Galvatron's channel is also in the description. Alright, Mr. Trooper 4846 says, I could use this to ask about a retrospective on TMNT or Star Trek or James Bond, but I'd like to ask, how are you doing, Primes Theater? What's your favorite color? Any pets you'd like to share with us? I'm doing alright. Answering some questions right now. It's a fun time. My favorite color is red, and no, I don't have any pets. These are great questions. Will you ever do a video on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Again, maybe. And I would love to hear your pitch for a Transformers series/movies. If by some miracle I ever got the keys to the Transformers kingdom, I would make the Optimus Prime solo movie. Bumblebee got a movie, now it's Optimus's turn. Better yet, I'd make it an origin story. Now, I know Transformers 1 kind of covered a lot of that, but I had my idea before that came out, and it's a bit darker and more in line with the CG trailers for the Cybertron games, with a couple twists thrown in for good measure. Here's the basic premise. During the war with the Decepticons on Cybertron, a young Optimus is framed for a crime he did not truly commit. As a result, he has been exiled from the Autobots, only to be captured by the Decepticons and taken to the Kaon prison complex. There, he meets Bumblebee, Ironhide, and Blur, and must find a way to ignite a new spark of hope among the Autobots, with Megatron as the lead villain, kind of acting as a warden for the prison. What it becomes is ultimately a Prison Break movie, without a doubt inspired by that one level from War for Cybertron, but it kind of unfolds in a different way, and the specifics of the story are things that I don't think Transformers has really done before, so... Peak Fiction 238 says, seeing as you're very invested in films, have you ever tried to write your own sort of script? I just mentioned a Transformers story that I came up with, which I've written and rewritten many times over the years. In fact, a lot of the stuff I write on my own is Transformers, which might be an issue, but I've got a whole series of movies here that I've chipped away at for years. Hell, I even wrote a sequel to Transformers 1. After the box office numbers started coming through, I kinda had the sinking feeling we were never gonna get a sequel. So I took matters into my own hands. I wanted to know what happened next, so I wrote it for myself. It's not bad either. It's probably not nearly as good as Transformers 1, but I was happy with it. The main issue with having a bunch of Transformers ideas is that I don't have a whole hell of a lot of original stories, which is kind of a problem. Sometimes I get ideas that I pursue every now and again, but nothing's ever gone beyond the concept phase. If something ever does though, maybe I'll divulge. Since you're a big Transformers fan, how do you feel about the franchise overall right now, and what would you do to improve it, either be shows, movies, etc.? We've been better, for sure, but we've also been a lot worse. Many people who've been in this fandom longer than me have talked about how we're nowhere near as bad as the franchise has been in the past. I mean, the thing almost died in the early 90s, and we're not at that point right now. I think, in terms of mainstream appeal, I mentioned this in part 5, but a full movie reboot after a hiatus might do it some good. Whatever it takes to appeal to new fans and new audiences is really gonna help, I think, with enough time to kind of separate it from where we've been. What are your top 4 favorite Transformers shows of all time? Top 3 is easy, I can tell you that. My top 3 are Prime, Animated, and Beast Wars. Those are easily up there. Picking out number 4 is a bit harder. I like a decent amount of Transformers Cybertron. I think G1's got some high points, but honestly, if I had to narrow it down, Cyberverse would be number 4. If only because of the Quintesson arc in Season 3, which I was totally surprised by when I first watched it, and it became one of my favorite depictions of the Quintessons in the whole franchise. There's some cool stuff in there. Rob Wave asks, what's a piece of Transformers media that has stuck with you, and what is your favorite piece of media? I mean, most of Transformers has, if only because I'm a serial rewatcher, so I've gotten to the point where I can quote like 90% of the first 3 movies from memory. But the one that's been the most influential to me was probably Transformers Prime. You know, it blew open my knowledge of where you could take certain Transformers stories, and even helped develop my enthusiasm with a good cliffhanger season finale. Prime had 2 of those, and they were awesome. Favorite piece of media, though? I mean, It has to be Transformers. Just the whole thing. There's nothing quite like it. Austin Skywalker asks, if you could become a Transformer, what would you name yourself and what type of vehicle would you transform back and forth? It can be a car, aircraft, anything. Back when you could customize your Transformers in the High Moon Transformers games, I had quite a few guys in my library. There was always one that was just Optimus Prime, but he wasn't alone. I had one Decepticon guy in the Dark of the Moon game that was a sports car who I made a really nice shade of purple. So pick your poison on make and model, but a sports/muscle car that's a nice, dark, shiny purple. And I'm terrible with names, so I'm open to suggestions, but let's run with Backtrack. That seems on brand. Although that's a character that exists already, so let's run it anyway. Sarcastic Robin on Twitter asks, what's the most important piece of media that impacted you and your life other than Transformers? I mean, it is Transformers, but if we're going to reach out to the next best thing, it might just be Cars. I like that movie a lot. It's not Pixar's best for sure, but it is the first movie I ever saw in the theater. So if you want to talk purely about the butterfly effect of how I got where I am now, that's one major turning point. And your second question is, what's the most important thing to you and your drive? I mean, money. Okay, that's part of it, but not the whole thing. I think it just boils down to wanting to make things that get people excited. Even dreaming up my own Transformers stories, part of it was wanting to come up with movies that I wanted to watch, but it was also about coming up with stuff that'd get people talking. It's why I like doing teasers and trailers for these videos, and revealing what's coming next at the end. I like when people are excited, and providing that is a lot of fun. Have you studied cinema, or is it just a passion for you? I actually did go to film school. I took a 2-year film program and it was a total blast. It got kind of hindered right at the very end because COVID happened, but we had a ton of hands-on experience with cameras, with real film. I learned how to use Avid Media Composer in my second year, which is the industry standard non-linear editor that's been used for all kinds of movies since the late 80s. Now, the reason I went to film school was because I wanted to make movies. It was all sparked when I got the 2-disc DVD of Transformers 2, because the second disc had a whole 2-hour documentary about the making of that movie. That was kind of the moment where I realized, wait, people do this for a job? From there, that was the goal, to get into filmmaking, specifically so I could make a Transformers movie and show everyone what this franchise could do. And I did start to get into working in the industry slightly. In 2022, I worked as a location production assistant on the first season of The Last of Us for about 2 months. Now, before you ask, no, I did not meet Pedro Pascal. In fact, I didn't meet anyone famous. I was way too low on the totem pole for that. But I did see some cool stuff. If you've seen the show, there's a whole set piece in the 5th episode where Joel is up in a building sniping people while this explosion goes off and a bunch of zombies come out of the ground. I was there when they filmed almost all of that. I saw so much from a distance, but I was there. I got a tour of that set, which was fun. I saw this explosion happen live, and I know it's this one because they only did 1 take. The unfortunate reality is, outside of those couple weeks, the job was grueling and incredibly boring. A lot of my shifts had me guarding a parking lot for 12 hours. I did have a chair, but those were some long, boring days. I didn't enjoy going to work every day, which is an unfortunate reality for way too many people out there in the world. And I'm sure many would trade in their own job to even have a day just watching a parking lot, especially considering how well it paid. I understand the privileged position I was in to even be there, and the privileged position I was in after to be able to take a step back for a minute and figure out what I wanted to do next. I met some cool people, I saw some cool things, but it was a bit of a reality check on what the film industry is really like when you're at the bottom of the food chain. Things happened to change just a bit later, because shortly after The Last of Us wrapped, I started making the Transformers video. And that, coupled with the Marvel video really starting to take off, is what got me to pursue this full time, because it was suddenly at a point where I could make money. So filmmaking is still my passion, it's what I like learning about. YouTube is just the thing that started taking off first. Mason McFly 007 asks, favorite movie of the year, favorite movie of all time, favorite film director of all time, favorite video that you ever released on this channel. Alright, let's run through these in reverse order. Favorite video on the channel was Halo Part 1, before it became the Interstellar section of Nolan Part 2. I think that whole video was good, but I was really proud of the Interstellar section. And now, by virtue of all the guest stars, Transformers Part 5 kinda takes the cake. I think that one is really cool. But every video I do, I try to make it better than the last. Transformers Part 5 set the bar really high, at least in my own opinion, so Destiny's got a lot to live up to. I think it's working out though. Favorite director? There are so many where I'm missing a large part of their filmography, you know? There are very few directors out there that I've seen every movie from. That being said, Nolan's definitely up there, James Cameron's got some major hitters, and Spielberg is of course fantastic. And I'm now realizing, having listed these guys out, that I think what I find most interesting about them is that in one way or another they create movies for mass appeal. That's kind of the stuff I really like diving into, it seems. You know, how do these guys create movies that appeal not just to their target audience, but to near universal audiences? How do you make something that manages to strike a chord like that to so many people? But to be mildly controversial, even though there are a couple movies from him I haven't seen, Rian Johnson's also on the list. I am of course a big fan of The Last Jedi, but I also think the Knives Out movies are a blast, and I'm very excited for Wake Up Dead Man. Favorite movie of all time? I take that and I raise you my letterboxed top 4, which are currently Transformers 1, Star Wars, Interstellar, and Return of the King. Are they all big movies? Yeah. Do I need to dig deeper into the more niche corners of the movie industry I haven't tapped into all that much? Also, yeah. But that's where we sit right now. Favorite movie of this year? Of the calendar year 2025? Superman's up there. I had a lot of fun with it, even though it's not perfect. I also enjoyed K-pop Demon Hunters. Now, I know nothing about K-pop, but of course this movie has been a cultural juggernaut this year. So after hearing things about it from all over, I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. And yeah, I get it. This is a fun movie with some good songs. I also appreciate that it's something the kids of today can fully claim as their own. It's not a franchise their parents loved being brought back from the 80s or something. It's fun when something like this comes around. The current generation has this all to themselves, and on a pure pop culture level, I think that's pretty cool. Sinners was another big one that I saw this year. I think there's some really cool stuff in that movie, from the smaller scenes to the bigger spectacle moments. And just recently, I finally got around to watching one battle after another, which was pretty good. It's over 2.5 hours long and it does not feel like it at all. It gets moving and stays moving top to bottom, and its relevance to the world we currently live in is of course unmistakable. But as of recording, there are a bunch of movies this year I haven't seen yet, including but not limited to Wake Up Dead Man and Avatar 3, which I'm pretty pumped for. This question comes to us from the Wild Robot Hype Fan 2025. They ask, do you have any interest in the Wild Robot? This person has commented like 3 or 4 times on the channel talking about the Wild Robot, and honestly, I respect the grind. And yes, I've seen the Wild Robot, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was fun. We've got 2 questions here asking about the Rumble and Frenzy color dilemma. Now, since most of my G1 experience is based on the cartoon, I've always seen Rumble as blue and Frenzy as red. However, I saw an idea posted online once years ago that I really liked and have worked into my own Transformers stories. The idea is they can actually swap colors at any given moment purely to confuse other people, and the only one who can tell the difference is Soundwave. I think everyone wins that way. Who would win in a fight, Unicron or Star Wars copyright strikes? Unicron has a hell of a fight ahead of him. That Star Wars copyright battle was no joke. The machine hated me on that one. It sucked. Thankfully, Unicron can consume the Disney empire in one bite, so he might be able to take the W on that one. How do you stay so positive when you script and record your videos? What horrid things do you have to do to get the negativity out of your system and leave only the good vibes? If there's any secret, it's just the fact that I believe the weird and strange world of movie reviews is incredibly low stakes. Whether someone likes or dislikes a movie isn't life or death. This is entertainment. This is fun. I've been on the internet long enough to see what constant negativity gets you. In fact, I used to make videos that were a lot more negative back in the day. I'd pick out movies specifically to pick them apart and point out what sucks about them. But that's really not a healthy way to look at this stuff at all. I like film as an art form, and no matter what I think of a given movie, I want to respect the craft that goes into it. It's really easy to do when I find something I really like, but even when I find something I don't like, I want to at least respect the time and effort that went into creating it. Especially since a lot of the things I talk about are created by genuine professionals who are the best of the best at what they do. Ian Lamont says, I've been doing retrospectives for a while, so any tips? I'm not trying to replace you, Prime. Oh, don't worry. If you replace me, I would only complain a little bit. As for any tips, I think if you're trying to get into making YouTube videos, I have 2 tips. 1, be passionate about it. People have said this time and time again, but if you're just doing it for the money, it's not going to work out. People will always be able to tell. At the same time, breaking through is going to be incredibly hard. My videos can struggle with viewership and I've got 100,000 subscribers, you know? 2, I know I make really long videos and it might seem appealing to follow in my footsteps right away, but I 100% recommend starting smaller. I did not start by making multi-hour videos. I got here almost by accident, really. So just figure out the amount that you're capable of doing. If it's 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. If it's 30 seconds, it's 30 seconds. 2 to 3 hours is going to be way too daunting right off the bat, and you'll never get it done. So understand your limits, know what you can do, and do that. Alright, we now have time for just one more question. What retrospectives are you excited to do in 2026? Now, I'm not going to tell you my plans for 2026 since I don't know them yet, but I will say the retrospective I'm most excited about right now is Destiny. I know, big shocker, but as I mentioned earlier, this video has been a long time coming. It's one I've wanted to do for quite a while and I'm finally jumping in to tackle. And in relation to that, for those who've stuck around to this part of the video, I've got something special for you. Many of you out there won't know, but on my Twitter page I sometimes post trailers for upcoming retrospectives. I've done this for Halo, Star Wars, Nolan, Transformers Part 5, and now I've got another one for Destiny. Are these trailers probably a bit too much considering I'm just talking about movies, TV shows, and video games for days on end? Probably. Are they fun to make? Absolutely. The real question though, are they fun to watch? That part is up to you. Without further ado, here is the 2-minute trailer for the upcoming retrospective on Destiny.
Is it possible? There you are. You don't know how long I've been looking for you. This is your destiny.
Yep, you read that right. Part 1 of the Destiny video will be out next weekend. The weekend after this goes up, our next journey will begin. Mark your calendars for the date on screen. I'd say it out loud, but as of recording this, I don't know when it is yet. Apologies to audio listeners. It's 1 week away. Saturday morning next weekend, Destiny arrives. For now, though, that's gonna do it for the 2025 Primes Theater Q&A Spectacular. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. I hope I gave some interesting answers. I hope you learned what you wanted to learn. And maybe in a year's time, we'll do this again. Until then, this will be the end of this video, and I will see you guys next weekend.